We'll see us.
Oh, okay.
We'll see each
And
other.
that's when I start talking.
And we'll just say, hey, everybody.
And Miss Marilyn, you just want.
Hi, everybody.
Good evening, everybody. So tonight we have a really good show for you, which is kind of from last week. If you didn't get to catch us, we have the super awesome Clint Smith with the Gray Panthers and actually
Yes,
a
yes,
smorgasbord
yes.
of areas. We've got our lovely
awesome,
Miss
awesome.
Marilyn over here.
Hi,
And
everyone.
we've got, of course, of LULAC District 12, Gavino Fernandez
Yes,
Jr.
hey, Gavino.
And he's got some announcements for everybody. And of course, we've got everything that Mr. Smith has got to fill us in on. So we will start off with Miss Marilyn and her
yourself.
hellos. Oh, and myself. I knew I was going to have word vomit because Adela Fernandez, myself, do outreach. I do a lot of things, but currently I'm doing a Hispanic outreach for the Travis County Republican Party, and this shows today. So
Awesome.
we'll go ahead and start. Gavino has some announcements he wants to give everybody.
We have a lot of activity going on in the neighborhood, so I want to bring attention to one program that if you live within Cerza Chavez Street, Willow Street, that's the north boundary. Segovia Street's the south boundary. Chicon and Pleasant Valley. If you live within that area, the City of Austin, the Holly Good Neighbor Program, they're going to once again begin their home repair program. And they have quite a few programs that they'll be offering to the people or homes that are in that area. This is part of the overall Holly mitigation funding that Austin Energy paid back to the community for the damage that they did to the community while they were running the power plant for the past 30 years. So this was one of the things that the neighborhood negotiated with the city. So, but anyway, we have $1.2 million left in that kitty, and we won't have any more money. And so if you live in that area, you're a homeowner, you can apply. And right now we're looking for candidates for people that have homes that basically need to be replaced, and they're at 130,000. And right now we're trying to convince council to spend all that money on replacing 9 homes, because they all talk about affordability. They all talk about this. Well, here you have $1.2 million ready to spend in an area that needs it, and the people are qualified. So you don't need to go to the government for a application or a proposal. It's already there. So if they're really serious about affordable housing and gentrification, they're always concerned about, oh my God, we're losing. Well, here's an opportunity to keep at least 9 families
That's a good point.
in the neighborhood. And they have to stay there for 30 years because it's a 30-year forgivable loan. So as long as they live in that home and do not sell, the only thing they pay is the insurance and obviously the taxes.
Right.
But for 30 years, you'll keep these 9 families, and I call it a anti-gentrification tool. So if they're real serious about it,
It's a good label.
you know, we're looking at people wanting to apply and use these funds because you're the ones that qualify for that. Now, we've had a lot of problems on Cerza Chavez. It's grown. A lot of businesses, a lot of people have moved there. And like Austin, the center area, we have a lot of problems with traffic, with music. A lot of bars are opening up because Rainy Street, it lost some bars. So they're all coming down this way. So what we did is we organized together as neighborhood associations, and we'll be going before the Planning Commission tomorrow at 6 to ask for a moratorium on all permits and for the city to do a comprehensive land use master plan for Cerza Chavez, just like they did for Lamar and Riverside. That way, we won't have to be having fights like we're having with the hotel. And the other day was a bar that wanted a 2 a.m. permit. And, you know, it keeps going and going. But if we have a plan, an overall comprehensive plan, it's already set. Everyone comes to the table, we agree on it, and we move forward. And that way we can coexist as small businesses in the neighborhood. Because Cerza Chavez, 1 block in, north and south, you're in the neighborhood,
Yes,
you know.
that is true.
Yeah, and that's
So-
so interesting for you to give us that input because a lot with the 10 different councils, District 6 may not see all
Right.
this diversity happening over on the east side.
Right, so.
District 1, District 3.
So these are things that are coming down the road, and there's another big activity that's coming down, and this is for all you parents out there. August the 15th, AISD will have its annual Back to School Day school supply at the Austin Convention Center. And you look at the AISD website or listen to TV because they'll be announcing it, and they'll have buses coming, picking up families from different schools, bringing them to the convention
That's
center.
free?
And that is free. They all come down to the convention center on that day. They receive a backpack. They receive schools, supplies. They receive safety tips. You have different organizations there to greet the parents and the students. So that's on August the 15th at the convention center. So
That
keep
is
your eye
good.
out on the in the newspaper and the media, because that's something that benefits our kids a lot.
That is awesome. You know, if that is something that's coming out of AISD's budget, that is great.
Yes.
I mean, at least we see something for the kids that can,
I think this is their
which is
10th
really
or
well.
15th. It's grown every year. Every year it grows.
That is so good.
I mean, I know people that don't even have kids in the ASD that go, but
yes, yes.
but
I want
But
to
at least
talk
the
about,
effort is there.
Yeah, that is so true. Now, you know, this area you're talking about, Rainey, is that across 35 that's by the IHOP?
yes, yes.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. There is a lot of development that has come
Right.
there, a lot of nightclubs, and when South by Southwest is in, it is just amazing. I went by one day, and I'm like, 1 year, and I'm like, where did this come from? I had no idea it even existed.
Well, you know what's interesting for me as Austin changes in that area is how we have become so overwhelmed with bars and taverns. I mean, like alcohol.
When people are getting taxed out of their houses, like,
Alcohol.
hey, let's put a bar here.
You know, it's a party city, if you will, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I even into the neighborhoods, a lot of these small businesses that are opening. I think there's a Juniper opening on Cesar Chavez. I don't know what Juniper is, but I understand it's a very high Japanese, high-class restaurant. I mean, you're talking about $200 just to sit down.
Wow.
So these are the kind of businesses that are now coming into our neighborhood. And what's happening is that they don't have sufficient parking.
Exactly.
So all their parking goes into the neighborhood, and you arrive at home, and sometimes you have to park 2 blocks just to get into your own home. So those are some of the things that this comprehensive land use plan is going to address, and that way we can have rules and regulations and zoning that, you know, will accommodate only businesses that are there that fit that size, not big businesses. Like they want to build a hotel on Waller and Cesar Chavez. You know, so that's going to impact the neighbors on Willow.
It almost seems like nobody's paying attention to everything that, like, all the candidates were saying. There were 13 candidates for District 3. None of them were saying, hey, come build here.
Yeah.
They were all talking about, we can't afford our rent. We can't afford our mortgage. Where the hell do we go? Oh, well, there's a bar now in my driveway. So it's amazing that this is even happening with all these candidates that brought up. Nobody was saying, hey, come build here.
Right.
I mean, who was saying that in District 1, District 3? Really? I mean, who was saying those things?
Yeah, Gov't, I have a question too. How is that Waller Street Development Project affecting these steps you're talking about? What's happening in the neighborhood?
Well, what they will, if they build it, they'll tear down about 5 homes on Cesar Chavez.
Right.
And then there's 2 lots where the property owner also owned 2 lots that face on Willow. So you have kind of like an L shape going
I
into
see.
Willow.
Right.
So you'll have neighbors waking up to a 4 or 5-story building.
Wow.
You know, your privacy's gone, your
Yeah.
quality of life is gone, and these are people that bought these homes for,
Right.
you know, this is where they come home to rest and sleep after a long day's work. And it's that intrusion
Yeah.
on that, you know, that is not good.
Yeah.
And we want to preserve what's there. We want to preserve some of those homes, you know, and our community, that area, we really wanted to build it for pedestrian,
Right.
be pedestrian friendly, bike, walk,
Right.
you know.
right.
So, but bringing in these type of hotels and condos and all that, that goes totally against that whole
Right.
concept, the whole
Well,
philosophy.
part of the reason I'm asking is in connection with the 9 houses you mentioned. It seems to me that there may be some built-in disincentives. For example, you're going to have the Waller Street development, the Waller Creek development,
Right.
all these other developments. How many people really will want to commit to 30 years in an area like that? And what about the taxes? I'd be very interested in looking at the fine print and that sort
Well,
of thing.
on the
But we've
tax-
seen that happen
yeah,
before,
on
you
the-
know.
on
Yeah,
the- on-
it's a great thing, but it's an
Right.
offer that people do
On
refuse.
the taxes, the majority of the applicants are either senior or disabled.
Right,
So, instead of
Probably
the
gonna stay
5,000, it's
Yeah.
like 3,000.
right.
So that's still kind of
Right.
reasonable.
Well, then there's a
Uh,
quality of life issue,
And,
you
well,
know, the
but
zoning
see,
and.
here's the other thing. You have a home where the foundation is way off.
Right,
You have a home that when it's winter and you go take a shower, you get all kind of breezes coming in,
I don't even know how to crack there.
and so here's the money. Why not rebuild that home, because it's going to be energy efficient. It's going to be good for
Right.
the overall energy use.
Right, right.
Because instead of $400 monthly bills, now we're talking about 150. See, so there's a lot of benefits in the long run, and like I said, it keeps the families in
Sure.
the neighborhood. They don't pay mortgage for
No.
30 years.
Well, no, miss, what I mean is, I realize it's a good thing.
Yeah.
The point is, how many people will be able or willing to take advantage of it when they begin to look at all the other, there's a quality of life issue, for example.
Yeah.
How many older people will want to remain in that area with all the bars around?
Well,
and,
there's
you know,
some
the other-
there's some homes.
That's the question. I'm
Yeah,
asking.
because there's some homes further in, like on Garden,
I see. Good,
away
good.
from Cesar
Okay,
Chavez.
that's right.
That where some of these homes are at, closer to the river.
Right.
On Segovia, and they're scattered. They're not all in one
I
area,
see,
but
I see.
because it's a
Okay.
large area,
Yeah.
they're scattered. And they're right next to these, urban square
Right.
homes that they're building nowadays.
Right, I understand.
You see-
Well, one good thing, I guess maybe the only good thing about the 30-year mortgage is that, and it happens so much when the elders do expire and go on, that the children, they tend to sell those
Right.
homes. So for them to be able not to be able to sell it and have to remain there for 30 years, I mean, that's how they continue that homestead there.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, I think that's okay, but it's still kind of
You know,
shaky anytime you deal with the
But
city.
they do have
So,
options to sell.
I see.
Okay. Now, you do have that option to sell, but when you sell, you have to pay the loan,
ah,
the initial loan that you got to build the home. In this case, 130,000.
Right.
Plus, you have to pay 25% of your profit back to the city. See, so it's if you look at
Right.
it from, it's a win-win for both.
But I see.
The city's not going to lose anything.
oh no.
The government, if push came to shove, they're going to secure the house and they're going to sell it, make it affordable to someone else.
Yeah.
So there's no loss there.
Okay, well, you understand what it's just a
Yeah.
matter of being very careful because people have been burned quite
Oh,
a
yeah.
couple of times.
And-
Not too
and-
long ago, you remember, there was a program, which provided for bathrooms, I think it was, your renovation of the bathrooms in older homes for seniors. And a long list, you sign up and get on that list and so on. So then, when they get to you, then you find that, well, fine, they'll do the bathroom, but then what about the rest of the house? You know,
Yeah.
foundations eroded. It's gonna cost you
Exactly.
$70,000 at that time to do the rest of the house, so you can't do the bathroom without being committed to the rest of it. See?
And see, and
A
that was
built-in disincentive,
and
is what I'm
Band-Aid.
saying.
right, and that was the philosophy behind the home replacements in Holly. It all started with they call it home repair loan program, but how it all started was they would go and make assessments under a weatherization program. For example, they went to my dad's house. They did an assessment. We'll invest $50,000 in this home to weatherize it,
Right.
to bring it up as much as we can. So they'll go to the home, Austin Housing Finance will go out there, they'll assess the home, and once they assess it, and they say, you know what? It's gonna cost more than 50,000. It's gonna cost us around 70,000. Then the city, Austin Housing Finance makes a decision, say, okay, instead of weatherizing this home, we'll tear it down and we'll build a new one.
And this can be found on the City of Austin's
This is
website.
It's Austin
Home
Housing,
repair programs.
Austin Housing Development Finance Corporation, and it's under the Holly Home Repair Program. So, but that was
I see.
the whole. That's how they started. Now there are homes that are that are very strong, and they did get weatherization, but it didn't require that much, maybe 40, 50,000. So it didn't meet that threshold where now you build a home. But right now we feel we have 9 homes that are and the qualifying process is not an easy one either.
Right, I understand.
No loans, no mortgage on the property. Well, you really have to, it's what they call clear title. You have to have clear title. So yes, let's say, cause I have a home. My dad applied and he passed away, so I kicked in. Let's say when I do that, well then, if I have a family member that qualifies the economic bar,
Right.
then they can continue.
Right.
Or again, they can sell. But the longer you live there in the program, it kind of reduces the amount.
I see.
For example, in the 14th year, instead of 130,000, now you're gonna pay like 60,000 or something like that.
I see.
Well,
So-
I'm glad you shared this with us because District 3 and District 1 really need incentives like that. They need, and when incentive, I mean a glimmer of hope at this point sometimes because people are literally being taxed out. So thank you for that
And
information.
I'm being guided by what one of Adela's friends once said, trust but verify.
Right.
You're right. Trust, especially when you're dealing with the city.
But I do want to
Yeah.
give a last, and then we'll move on. I do want to give a good shout out to Capital Metro. And
You got your bus
all,
card?
all my bus driver friends. I use Capital Metro, well, because I live central and most of my pit stops are the city council, commissioner's court,
Right.
the state capitol, and they just drops me off right there in the front of the door. I don't have to worry about parking, and thank God I don't have to worry about traffic in that area.
Oh my gosh, traffic.
And all for $2.50. And so today I was, since 8 this morning, I've been on the bus, and I was able to make 3 different locations that I needed to be within time, because now they run every 15 minutes,
Right.
So
That's a 24-hour pass.
yeah, this
Yeah, I
and
see.
this is a
That's a
24-hour
24-hour.
pass.
Okay, right.
And the other day I had to go to precinct 4 out there by the airport, take care of some business, and I went on the web, and yes, the bus goes out there, and my God, for $2 you can't beat that. But
It's a lot
anyway, thank you,
cheaper than
bus
gas.
drivers. And some people say, "Why do you ride the bus?" I say, "Because being at home, because I work out of my house, stuck there all day. After a while, I'll just like to get out, get on the bus.
Well, shoot, if
You-
it's that cheap, what the hell am I doing riding a car?
You meet interesting people all the time.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. So,
You must get a whole bunch of colorful riders.
so
all
that
throughout.
makes my day,
Awesome.
But I don't do it frequently, I just get into it. And I did go to a Camp Metro board meeting today
Good.
because we want Cesar Chavez bus to keep going east on Cesar Chavez. So right now it turns in,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but anyway, thank you, and thank you for the time for allowing me to share my.
Well, this is very
information.
important stuff. I mean, so I'm
Very
glad that
important.
you shared it with us, especially for the areas that need it.
Well, lastly, I agree with that, though. The old saying, ride with us, or rather, take the bus and let the bus driver do the driving, rather, or whatever the way it goes. But, the service is much better now than it was, and in many cases, the rates are
Yes.
very reasonable, as you point out. Take the bus and leave the driving to us.
There you go. That was
That's it. I knew it would
that
come.
was a
sooner or
Greyhound.
later.
So tell us let's pick up on, if you didn't get to catch our show last week, Mr. Smith has already put down so much information. So we don't have enough time for a recap, but so I'd like to pick up where we left off because we do have, I'll let you kind of take it from here, the petition that you're wanting to get signed, because before the show, he did point out that was one of the most important things that he wanted to talk about. So we'll kind of pick up from there.
Well, that's agreeable, Adela, as long as you call me Clint.
That's my manners.
I'm in my second child.
In my mind, I'm thinking my mom's going to be like, why didn't you call him Mr.
I'm only in
Smith?
my second childhood. Remember, we don't get older,
Second
we get
childhood.
better.
That's
we
right.
get better, yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. Really, we're all here in the public interest, and we want to do what we can. For example, in terms of affordability and the kinds of issues we're talking about now. And I'd like to quote to start off with our friends in North Austin, the North Austin Neighborhood Association. There can be no affordability without accountability. And so one of our big problems, in a way, I'm speaking on behalf of Great Panthers as well as the neighborhood organizations and also a number of the interfaith groups that are very much concerned, and we're really focusing in on the FY16 budget. That's very current. The issues that are coming up right now are ones that we're concerned about. And I guess the real point, first off, we don't have this information on the screen, but as a part of our concern are very well documented issues and examples of unresponsiveness on the part of the city when it came to questions that were raised by the neighborhoods and by the other groups. Why are the taxes going up? Why haven't we been able to get more responsiveness on the part of city staff and so forth? So over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been involved very much, Great Panthers and neighborhood organizations, with working with the city. We supported 10-1. You worked in the 10-1 campaigns, or the drive to get it, supporting candidates and so on. And again, at the beginning of this year, one of the initial recommendations made by the North Austin Association out there, these are 5 neighborhood associations in that coalition, was for an outside independent audit of the city's finances. The idea being, as someone put it very succinctly, would you buy or go into a new business without checking out the books first? And I think most of us would say no. We'd want to check out and find out. Otherwise, it's sort of like moving, as the old saying goes, moving the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic. We can make all sorts of changes, redistricting, and hopefully get at the issue of accountability and transparency by making changes. But we've been through this now in 6 months. And so many of the neighborhood and other associations feel we still have not been able to get answers to the kinds of questions we raised. For example, we just spent, the taxpayers did, $250,000, $260,000 for a report, an outside audit report, the Zucker report, that somehow totally missed an issue and the question of 4-count bribery indictment that took place 2 years ago. And so maybe there were good reasons, but we have not been able to identify what they were yet. When you spend that kind of money for review, we expect to get results from that. We also have looked at issues, and now I might say too, and we will have this information more specifically, hopefully on the screen. But now in the very unit in which the bribery questions were raised, the Planning and Development Review Department, I think it was, it's been divided into 2 now. But under the current budget, again, an example of why we're focused on budget is there is a proposal now to add 15 positions and several $1 million more in funding under the new budgets. And we're still asking the question, well, what about the old issues and the other questions? So these are the kinds of issues we still find have been unaddressed. We've also looked at the problems, and again, North Austin raised these questions about internal audits. And in many cases, those have not been adequate. So we're left with one alternative. We have gone through the 10-1 changes. There have been questions raised and still unresolved by other councils. We now have been through 6 months of actual implementation of 10-1, and now we're facing with a new budget cycle, or at least decisions being made. And we have to keep in mind that the budget, and I realize quite often you mention budget and eyes glaze over, but the fact is the budget is where decisions are made. It's where priorities are set. And if you're not in the budget, you're out.
That's a good
You
point.
ain't in.
Yeah.
So what we're concerned about is with the council coming back to meet on the 30th, I think the first work session, we want to make sure that we're in the ball game. It's just hard to get your batting average up or to have one at all if you can't get in the ball game. And right now we feel the public is still sitting on the bench. I might say even, I'm not even sure a lot of us know what the rules of this ball game happen to be now under the new 10-1 setup. So this is about the system. It's not about pointing fingers. It's not about raising questions about individuals necessarily. But if it goes down that trail in terms of accountability, then so be it. That's what we're talking about. That's what we mean by transparency, and we assume that's what our elected officials mean.
That's what most of them campaigned
That's right.
on.
Well, the final point is, and people forget this, but when you raise your hand and take the oath of office, that is an oath. It's a sworn oath. And under federal regulations and guidelines, if you're put under oath or if you ask for testimony or subpoenaed, I have to remind myself and other people sometimes that, we don't, people don't give depositions, we take them. It's a total different matter. So as far as petitions concerned, we've gone through the drill, we've gone through asking, we've gone through requesting, we've gone through writing without response that the public needs. So we now have a petition to the United States Attorney. This is in line with the outside independent investigation that North Austin, Great Panthers, others have asked for. And what we'd like to do to close the deal here, in a sense, to make sure your audience understands, we need and would like to have as many signatures on that petition as we can possibly get. It represents the will of the people in communities and neighborhoods among the interfaith group, many of whom feel that we've been left out of the ballgame. And we're tired of sitting on the bench. Taxes keep going up, services keep being cut despite improvements in the bus service. But still, we have also we have other issues and we need to have them addressed. And our fear, and I use that word advisedly, but our concern is if we don't make a difference in this first budget cycle under 10-1, we're behind the 8 ball, really. Because then we're committed to all sorts of new expenses, and people get busy, they don't have time, not interested. So we want to focus on this accountability at this point. So that's a long answer to your question, but I wanted to try to capsule some of that what we talked about last week.
Well, and I hope that people have their pens and papers writing this stuff down because this is important stuff to be, especially if you plan to run for an elected official position within the city of Austin, because it's not just the neighbors, it's not just the elected officials, it's the potential elected officials that have run and plan to run again, or the Joe Schmo who's watching this show and may be like, you know what, I think I want to get involved in that and hop off the couch and get involved with something.
That's right.
like
Well,
this.
and again, it is the system. We have good people in office, elected officials, appointed officials, but we have to help them do their job. Because you get in and you're not quite sure what it is, it's very easy to make a misstep, and before you know it, you're compromised in one way or another. We also recognize that we have unelected officials, for example, the city staff. They also take an oath of office. And again, our consistent problem has been we are unable to get responses from the city manager and city staff on many of these issues. And these are serious matters. When we come to the issue of bribery, or forgery, or some of these other criminal practices that have been raised, and these are parts in court documents. And we're told, well, they don't exist anymore because of document retention practices. Well, our question is, and mine is, as a former federal investigator and auditor, what happened to the records? We have them. Why don't you have them? Were they destroyed? But tough luck, because at least we have them, so we want to ask these questions.
But now that's some accountability right
that
there.
budget hearing is Thursday at 9 a.m.
I'm not sure what.
Yeah, no, I saw it on the website today. It's this
Thursday at 9 a.m.
At 9 a.m.
People are working at that
At
time.
9 to 12 at the Austin City Hall.
That's such an obscure time. People are working on Thursdays at 9 a.m. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, really? I mean,
Well, that's the council schedule, so if they
Yes.
go according to their schedule and not the people that work.
But it is going to be interesting, the budget process, because now you have 10 different districts.
Right.
And now each council member is going to look at their wish list in their area
That's
and
true.
find out that, you know what, in order to do this, I need to get 3 or 4 or 5 of y'all to come with me
Right.
so I can get this done.
Right.
Whereas before, it was like, we're just going to do it over here and that's it. So now you have 10 cats, if you will,
Yeah.
going to be fighting for those funds to make sure that their district receives the amount of monies that they feel that
Yeah.
they deserve. So that part is going to be very interesting.
Well, that was a part of the downside as we saw it of 10-1, because, you've got people fighting over diminished turf, in this case funds, in many cases. Although, we look at it this way, it cuts 2 ways. Let's look at the point when we talk about accountability and the system itself operating in the way it should. There are certain things that are common to all of us. For example, affordability is the big issue. That affects everybody, whether it's inner city homeowners or in the suburbs, whatever it might be. Taxes, service costs, service cuts, and that kind of thing. So again, when we're talking about or asking questions, where is the money going? You know, I'll give you an example. In the current budget this year, FY15, and the interfaith group said this is immoral last fall when it was passed. 17% of the budget goes to health and human services, 17%. 70%, 69% goes to public safety. Now that's police, fire, EMS. And yet as a part of that 70% or 69%, EMS workers in some cases are under so much pressure that some have committed suicide. We don't know why, we didn't get into that. But the point is they're working long shifts, long hours, and there's been a lot of publicity about this. So when we talk about allocation of funds, 17%, the interfaith group says that's immoral because you're cutting libraries, you're cutting education, you're cutting training, kids, families, and so on. That's what I mean, we're sitting on the bench. We want to get off the bench and get in the ballgame.
Why are we not doing better when we have an African-American city manager?
What's the question?
Why are we not doing
Are we
better?
not doing better?
Well, I think you'd have to ask Mr. Ott that.
I mean, in your opinion, I mean, a lot of us went and protested and marched and did this to make sure we had people look like us in those kind of positions. And now that they're there, things aren't.
You feel like it's stagnant.
Now, well, things haven't changed. I guess what I'm saying.
Well, you're right in the sense of asking the question, but on the other hand, my answer to that would be it's the system really that operates in the way it does. Number one, if you start with the city charter, it provides for a weak mayor, strong city manager.
That's an important aspect.
There's no question about it. And we've looked at that. I was on the Charter Revision Commission back in 2000, and we looked at that. We had recommendations and so on, but it's the way it is, and it takes time to change that. The other point, though, is that city staff, city manager, they respond as well to other pressures, other interests. There's the Chamber of Commerce over here, the developers' interests over here. There are all sorts of other special interests in addition to our interests, human interests. And part of our problem is, again, this is what we want to do now. We want to get people much more involved in making sure that our voices are heard. So it's not just the Chamber of Commerce and developers and where the money happens to come from.
And it's not just a voice, it's an artillery of
that's right.
facts
That's
and
right.
things that, like you
Well,
said, you can back up.
Yeah, and again, we make all these changes, redistricting, spend money, improve the council chambers, expand all that and so on, and we still don't see much more in the way of responsiveness.
And that's when
than
you
we did
have
before.
all 10 fighting over the same money,
Yeah.
when they become creative and start asking more questions. Well, wait a minute.
Well,
What's
but
this
if you,
doing over
if you're
here?
not, if you can't get the answers from the city staff, they can ask all the questions
Yeah.
all day long.
Yeah.
This is what we've been doing. And this is why we are, again, in line with the North Austin recommendation. We want an outside independent audit. The independent audit by Zucker didn't answer the questions. The city's audits don't answer the questions.
How
Would
feasible
you
do
buy
you
a
think
new
that
business
is?
without looking at the books? I would not.
How feasible do you think that is, given that the audit that was already conducted was displeasing?
Well, when we raise issues of bribery, forgery, criminal practices, those are issues
Like,
that
shut it
fall-
down, shut it down.
Well, these are issues that fall under that oath of office.
Yeah.
They're criminal violations. And for example, when we're talking about $8 million in questionable funds or misuse of funds for rehabilitation, we go back to, that's why I asked you about the other houses there. But you get $8 million in rehab funds, stimulus funds, and we're not clear where those went. I was a few years ago on the housing bond drive or initiative, Housing Works. $55 million in money that the taxpayers approved as a part of a much larger city bond. And I think most of that was accounted for. There were some very good things done with it and so on. But on the other hand, we do know that there are certain funds that were not accounted for. I personally resigned as treasurer because the city manager at that time, and we couldn't get it from anybody in the city, had set up 5 positions on the city payroll out of that bond money. And that bond money, of course, was strictly for bonds for rehabilitation. But we couldn't get answers to that, and so that's one of the questions we've been asking all along. Again, accountability. If we can't get answers to the questions from city staff, you can't get answers from our elected officials, where do you go?
Well, there's a recall opportunity on some of these council members if they don't chime up or respond to this inquiry, because the effort of your petition could also increase the effort for a petition to recall these council members, because they've already served 6 months, and by law you cannot recall a council member until they've served that 6 months. So they're eligible,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the other beautiful thing about the 10-1.
And interesting that maybe not a lot of people don't even know about that.
And you know that that's the interesting about the 10-1, because I'll never forget, once it was in place, we had a couple of organizations told me about 2 meetings where a particular council member didn't show up. And the gentleman said, you know, came to my house Saturday and said, you know, I'm going to wait till Monday when they open the office to find out why he didn't show up. I said, why do you have to wait till Monday? He lives right there.
Go knock on the door.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, he lives right there. Why do you have to? That's why we
Right.
wanted 10-1.
Right.
And they are your neighbors,
and they're-
truly.
I
You're the
mean,
council is your
so-
your neighbors, truly.
Can you imagine? I haven't looked. I'm going to look into this.
Well,
To get on the ballot for this last election, all you needed was 25 signatures
right.
within your district. So I'm thinking that it maybe that amount just to recall a council member, because they go based on the number of voter turnouts in the last election.
25 elections.
No,
Yeah.
25 signatures.
Signatures to get on the ballot.
Oh my
To get
God.
on the
Yeah.
ballot.
Yeah.
To
Really?
Yes, that was
I see.
all that was
That's
That's
required
amazing.
for all these council members that are in place right now.
I see.
And that's
So-
interesting considering that there were some really close runoffs, very close runoffs in a lot of the districts. So
So
it's
you
like,
don't have to pay fees.
well, candidate A ain't working out, so let's recheck ourselves, recall that one, you know, and go with who.
And that was the strength of this whole
I
process.
see, yeah.
That we can do that now.
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with that particular provision. I know that under state law, and we looked at this a number of years ago, recall and referendum could be a pretty complex thing, and, you know, you had to go through a number of steps to do that. But if this is something else,
Oh, no, it's
I
a
would say
tool.
this is,
It's a
well,
tool
this
out
is
there.
another option.
Yes.
Although my preference, quite frankly, is to do what has been done in Dallas, El Paso, a few other areas. When you have issues and questions of criminal practices, like what we're talking about, and these are well documented. A number of these issues have come out of court cases. In one case, and this, again, this is very well documented, the city previous councils voted on 4 different occasions a total of $177,000 to basically starve out a person who had won their court case. In other words, they won the court case in court, but then the city, and this was on behalf of a private contractor, a minority contractor had done the work supposedly, but left debris, asbestos, lead paint, all sorts of things around. Anyway, to make a long story short, it went to court. The complainant won. The city then came in on behalf of the losing contractor and took taxpayer money, $177,000, basically to starve the person out. And that still has been in abeyance. And the sad result is that the family is still suffering from that. There was a young child involved, bad effects of lead and that sort of thing. See? So that's one of the issues too that's been swept under the rug, but it's not dead. And so when we talk about the adverse impact on people, that's why we say in this budget we want to put people first. You know, and right now it's the developers and the other people who are coming for, and not the people.
Have you approached the council member in the district that you live to sign this petition?
Well, I guess it was March 30, and I sent you a clip, a link on this. I was glad to be able to address the council as a whole, one of their briefing sessions, and to basically go through this whole drill to talk about how we could help, how we want to help the communities and so on. But I also mentioned there's some unfinished business. And there was some nodding of heads and so forth, and but that's about all. And that's about all we expected at that point. On the other hand, we followed up and wrote directly to the city manager as well as to every member of the council at least 3 times since that March 30th address. And again, there was a response, at least an acknowledgement from the mayor, but no response to the questions we were raising. So yes, I have been in touch with a number of council members about these same issues. So, but here again, under federal law, it is a violation of the law when elected officials refuse to respond or take some action on criminal issues and questions of criminal offenses. As I'm saying, we're not accusing anybody of anything. What we're saying is we want to help make the system work. We want to make 10-1 work. We're all involved in it. But we also have to flush the system in order to make it work. And that's where we need the help of the public.
And I don't think anybody had actually brought up that it is against the law in the terms that you have given it to us,
Well,
because that's some eye-opening stuff.
I worked for the federal government for some 24 years, including military, 25. But then I was involved at the Office of Management, Budget, Civil Service Commission, and so on. And I can recall in many, many cases, we always had to make a response when we got a letter or complaint from someone. Now, we might tell them, well, you don't know what you're talking about, or we've looked into it, or we will look into it, but we had to make a response. And so in many of
By
these,
law,
yes,
right?
in many of these cases, we not only have asked, but not these more recent cases, but we have asked by certified mail, return receipt requested. And we probably have enough of those green cards to paper the wall with no response.
I think if the citizens or the constituents know their rights, I think they could come forth and really be, really participate in these budget meetings. I think we just don't believe that we have a voice. I don't think that we believe that we'll make a difference. I just believe that if constituents, which is us, if we know what our rights are and how it is that we can approach city councils, these members that we voted into office, then we could know what it is what steps we need to take.
Right.
For the people to really get their voice in there.
That's right. Well, I fully agree with that. I think, again, that's a big part of the equation that we want to focus on, and that is the responsibility of the people. We elect good people quite often, for the most part, into these positions, but then we don't support them. And we have to support the people we elect in order to help them, because they, again, you mentioned questions about the city staff and so on. Well, all those folks down in City Hall are subject to all sorts of pressures. And when we don't support the people we elect or who are appointed in order to do, in other words, we have to give them the leverage they need to do their job.
Well, that is
Otherwise, it's
very
unfair.
true.
Yeah.
So my thing is that, okay, so when we vote these members into office, if we would just continue on with them instead of just saying, okay, election's over,
Right.
then we're gone. They
Exactly.
won, and that's the person I wanted in office, but we never follow up. We never go back.
Right.
We never we just expect some things to happen.
Right.
They may not necessarily happen that way,
Right.
but I think we need to really begin to build that relationship
Right.
and build that rapport with those persons that we put in that office.
Right.
And you can still be supportive of your candidate, but say, wait a minute, let me check
Exactly.
you on that right there, because let's
Thank you.
backtrack to what you said in 2000, whatever. Remember what you were campaigning
That's
on?
true.
Let's backtrack. I
on.
still support you and I still love you, but
But-
let me check you real quick.
That's good. And we need to be persistent with these things too, Adele. I believe that is so
Diplomatic,
good.
but
Yes.
persistent, yes.
Well, the old story, one of them about, I guess it was as far back as Franklin Roosevelt, and certainly LBJ, he'd tell a staffer who came up with a proposal, hey, this is a good proposal, but so-and-so's against it, and so-and-so's against it, so what you have to do now is make me do it. So what you're saying is we need to help our elected officials do what they, in many cases, want to do.
Exactly.
But we have to make them do it, even though the chamber may not like it.
And having
you're right.
So,
constituent
that's right.
support, that is
Yeah.
a good point to bring up, because it's like, these are the people, you may be in the
That's right.
minority
Well,
of the
see,
thinking
that-
on council,
and
but
that-
you
that's-
got your people
and
backing you.
that is what we're hoping for as a part of this. Well, our discussion right here is to help us all understand that we all have a role to play in a democracy. If we don't take part, then you can't blame our elected officials for not being able, in many cases, to fight off the forces that they have to deal with.
And more importantly, vote.
Yes.
Vote.
People
Yes.
in our communities do not vote.
That's right.
We have to, in some way, somehow. The last time I saw a great number of folk come out in the polls in our areas was when the lottery was on the
Yeah,
ballot.
that's true. Well,
Because that's money. It's
Well,
like, you talking money now. Even if it is some scratch-offs, we're
Important.
talking
That's
money.
important, Adele.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. And a lot of times there's some people that after they explain to me why they don't vote, that I kind of think, okay.
Well, you
I
have to be able. You
understand.
have to be able to
I
understand in
understand,
order to
you know.
find ways around it to make voting
I agree.
important to
And-
them. You got to come to their level rather than try to bring us to
Right.
theirs, because you got to think like them.
Yeah, well, I think we, in many ways, we've lost that sense of urgency. But I remember one of the old stories about, particularly around Boston, those areas, the old mantra was, vote early and often. So
That's a good one.
we're not suggesting that, but the point
Well,
is,
let me
the
ask
idea
you,
is that's the importance of having your vote.
Part of the 10-1, we also accepted our voting majority accepted the change of elections from the school board from
Right.
May to November. Now you have all those races in November. We've already had one. How did you experience that? Was that good or was it bad?
Well, I think it wears the public out in one sense. I think, well, let me answer it this way. One of the big problems I think we've seen, and we're seeing much more clearly now, is this whole, it's duplication, fragmentation, overlap, whether it's in programs or activities, whatever. Everybody's busy, and there's so many distractions. And I don't have any answer to that, but I do say if we had a better coordinated system of elections, it would help an awful lot, I think, in helping people be more serious about, the whole voting process. On the other hand, our rulers, the ones who really control this country, some would say the 1%, like it the way it is and would like for it to get even more so, the old divide and conquer. Our hope, though, is that adversity will begin to bring people together. Hard times have a magical way of helping and make people work together.
Well, maybe because of peer practices. Me personally, I felt like I was overwhelmed.
Right.
Too many
Right.
candidates, not enough time to
Yeah.
learn from
Yeah.
the city council, the school board, and everybody, and then the state races
Right.
and all that. So,
But how do you feel?
well, again, this was my first time experiencing
I
that.
see, right.
So I kind of felt like, and even working as an election judge, a lot of the people that did come to vote, well, I mean, they were just they didn't even know who they.
Right.
I was
should
I was an election clerk too,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of
there was
where do
like-
how far down do I got to scroll down? And then there's that frustration.
yet.
It's like I just wanted to vote for this person. I want to
Yeah.
vote for everybody down the ballot. And Austin City Council was so far down.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of them didn't make it
I remember
that far.
voters come in. I just want to vote for so and so city, and I'm out of here. No, but you have this, and I don't want to do that. So, and so that's why. But I was just curious how how other
Yeah, well,
people
it's an
had-
interesting question, though, because it brings to mind another point, though, and that is about the whole election process and the role of voting machines, electronic voting machines.
You're
and
opening another can of worms
I
there.
know, but again, it may be that, we're seeing a move and a concern now nationally where there's been so much in the way of questions about electronic voting machines, stolen elections, and that sort of thing. And particularly as we start looking at the money, at the financial side of things, and people want to make sure their voices are heard, and we want to make sure that's done effectively. So it may be that that'll help to cause much more of a careful and close review of what I guess is a Federal Elections Commission now, and then there's two or three other commissions
Let's talk about
nationally.
Laura Presley's efforts.
Right.
And I commend her because it's on voting and the machines, and we love Dana. Dana's been on this show and will probably be on this show again. But Laura's inquiry is show me the county, Dana's office cannot show anyone this is Gavino's ballot and this is how he voted.
Right.
And she's questioning why were there more votes than names.
Right.
And they can't. And you can't do it. Right now, the electronic voting that we have, you can't do it.
The machines are 20 years old, like literally.
You cannot do
literally
it.
20 years old.
And you talk about trust.
Yeah.
Trust this machine that it's okay.
Well, yeah, I agree. And let me just say quickly on that. I agree with you.
Oh.
That's a very important
It's an
point.
interesting one,
Yeah,
though.
well, I would say this because I think the listeners here, viewers, will be interested in this. 4 years ago, the Electoral Study Commission, we had basically it was a study group. Dana had set this up to look at the whole electoral process in a sense, in the county. And basically it was a matter of new voting machines being bought. So there have been voting machines, some improvement there in terms of the numbers and the quality, I guess, the quality.
This is a step up. What we got
Well,
now?
but my point is this: as a part of the process of the work of that group, we had a number of people, I think about 16 groups, that found it very difficult to get the ear of the county commissioners. There was the Gray Panthers, the Green Party, any number of other groups that wanted to be heard, and the only time we could get in, basically, at the commissioners' hearings was during the public, what's called the 3-minute period, public comment period. And in the final analysis, our groups felt that we were that we were generally shut out, and so we did provide, and this is online, an alternate response to the decision and the report that came out of that study that was run by the county clerk. So what I'm saying is we agree there are a lot of questions about the system itself, and so it's not surprising when we say, well, I'm confused, all these elections being held, the question of electronic voting machines. Again, it comes back to this point. We don't feel the public's voice is being heard.
Exactly.
Or if it's listened to at all, it's disregarded, but it's not, we don't get the response we need.
Well, what
in terms
happened
of
to the
action.
old practice of going and?
Well, we advocated
ballot.
paper ballots.
But
We
you
have
know what?
advocated
You know
paper
why
ballots.
I like that? Because when we did that, we had to
Right.
count individual ballots.
Right,
It encouraged more people and more eyes in the process.
that's right, right,
Today, because it's electronic, it's less people.
yeah,
It's less people that look into the real action, look into the real results.
right.
And some people
Whereas-
don't like going in to vote for their first time, and they have no idea how to use a voting machine. So they're like, maybe I'm
Yeah.
just not going to do this after all. Some people have. As an election clerk, they see the lines and they're like, I don't want to vote that badly. But so it takes like juggernaut bridge builders like ourselves to be like, keep going, because it makes our job harder. Those of us that are trying.
And I know I'm going to be hanged by this, but I don't see the voter ID as an obstacle, the law.
Exactly.
I don't see it
I
at
mean,
all. I mean,
You have to
I'm
show
sorry,
identification
I'm sorry.
everywhere else
Now,
you go.
What I have
mean,
mentioned when the argument was held at the Capitol is that, require it, but make it accessible free, like they do in Mexico. In Mexico, you go into many neighborhoods, and remember the libraries, the
right.
library books. What was it there? The book library that was on mobile wheels that would come
Right.
around the neighborhoods. Well, in Mexico, they have those. So you go take your documents, they give you a picture, and it's your electoral voter card. Easy, accessible.
Right.
Now, I think the only issue here in Texas with the voter ID was that you would have to pay and you'd have access to it and all these other obstacles that, people were saying, but I don't see it as an issue. But I would like to see it that it be made available free for people could vote, and that's it. If Mexico can do it, which is considered a far way behind than we are in democracy, why can't we do it?
Yeah. Well, again, like quick response to that. I think some of us see that as just one slice of a much larger pie. The other part being the electronic voting machines. There's basically the control of the vote, depending on who's counting the votes, who's running the machines, and so forth. And so that's just a part of it. The identification and so on. So you can argue one way or the other. Although I did notice in the newspaper the other day that a former who was it? Someone, a high-level official in the Congress, was denied the voting certificate or being allowed to vote because he didn't have the proper credentials. I forget who it was now. But anyway, it can be very arbitrary. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, depending on who's running the system. And again, I'll repeat what I said before. One of the things Joe Stalin said, it really doesn't make a lot of difference who votes as long as I get to count them. So with that attitude, it does make a difference.
I
So,
think the
again, it's
best thing too is
transparency.
go vote early.
Right.
So you can take your time with early voting. You can miss and dodge the lines, and you can take your time looking over that ballot. Of course, you may not know everything about every candidate on there. Yes, you probably would have seen, advertisements about them on
Commercials.
television. So it is true. You need to do some research about the people that are there on this ballot. But I just feel that if you go to vote early at early voting, you can take your time and just have your mindset right, and it won't be so, encumbersome on you.
Right.
You won't feel like this is such a hard task. I
And
feel
take
like
your
just
kids
walking
with
away.
you to watch you vote, so you can set the next generations coming up.
You got a point. For a little, if you take them early vote.
I bring
So
my
there'll be a
sons to
little
watch
room.
me vote. I bring my sons to watch me vote because it's political socialization starts in the home, and
Exactly.
I don't care how they vote when they grow up, but I want them to know the importance of having a voice and making it
Exactly.
work, making the
Yes.
government work for them, not the other way around. Because people forget
Yes.
that elected officials work for you, not the other way around. No matter how clouded it can look, we elect them, and like you pointed out, we can take them back. And make the
Yes.
government work for you. Don't be afraid to force
Yes.
your opinion, even
Right.
if it is like you've been doing for so long.
Yeah,
you know.
well, we can, at least right now, as of now, we can recall them and we can take them back, but we don't, the problem is we don't know how much longer we'll have the right, and, with the laws that are being passed, with all the terrorism, all sorts of issues that we're seeing raised by people in power. I think our concern, basically, I'm speaking for Gray Panthers and some of the other groups, really is, and this is a part of the reason for this petition. Number one, we want to get people more involved in this whole process and recognizing that now is the time to do it. When you're getting cut, and this October 1 budget is going to feature an awful lot of cuts, not only to the people who are maybe dependent for services, but also the crime rates go up because many people who are unemployed, who are desperate, and there's all sorts of things that can happen.
Yes.
But our point is get people more involved in the system, including encouraging people to vote. But the main thing is make the system accountable to us.
Yes.
Because right
Yeah.
now it has gotten away from us.
Like I said, make
Yes,
the government
yes,
work
yes.
for you,
Well,
not the other way
exactly.
around.
We saw this happen. When I was in the military, I had an opportunity. I visited Berlin and parts of Germany in the mid-'50s, and I had a chance to see some of the former death camps. And you go back and you look at, and there's some illustrations of this, narratives, the rise and fall of the Third Reich, any number of others that talk about what happened in Germany in the 30s and how it got to where it was. And one of the first things that happened in 1933 when Adolf Hitler took power was suspension of elections. Well, when we get back to the point you're talking about now, we're at the point where step by step by step we're losing what we needed.
That is true.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you again for Mr. Clint Smith. I gotta throw the Mr. in there anyway, guys. I'm gonna get a spanking on the hand from my mom and dad if I don't. But I wanted to say thank you to Michael Cargill, who unfortunately isn't here, and Gabriel for throwing me on the spot, who's one of our other co-hosts, for Gavino Fernandez again for being here, LULAC District 12, and of course my lovely Miss Marilyn, who I always love having on the show. Please look up the Gray Panthers and look up, I hope you were taking notes.
Shared governance.
Coalition for Shared Governance. Please write
And
that
get
down.
involved in your
And yes,
neighborhood,
exactly.
community,
Get
your
involved and make your
politics.
government work for you. Make your government work for you.
Bottom line.
Bottom line. Again, thank you thank you all to our viewers, and we hope to see you next week.
Adios. Are we on?